Pamela.
Hello. What's up,
Oh, great to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So, Pamela, introduce yourself to the Automating Success audience and tell them about your opening song by John Legend. And just tell us, tell us what it is about that song. I mean, I listened to the song; it's pretty self-explanatory. But tell us when you hear that song, what feelings that kind of get bubbling in you. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm a writer and a business coach and a mom, which you may see children. If anybody's watching video of this, go behind me as we're doing virtual school over here. But I've been in business for 24 years this month, actually. And my main joy is really in connecting people with each other and really in building primarily the leadership capacity of business owners, helping people to feel better, stronger, more capable, but also really in building that connection that we have with each other. So my husband and I do it at our Main Street Learning Lab, which is in downtown Mesa, where we are usually in non-COVID times. But then also I do a lot of it virtually online. So the link, I think, with the John Legend song, I love John Legend. I've written about him extensively. He's a super interesting guy. And who's a former management consultant, actually, like I am. And I love the idea, I know for a lot of people who are interested in making big change in the world, of having that belief that there are other people out there who want to connect, who want to really join together in order to make positive change. And so I always just get that good feeling when I listen to that particular song and just to John Legend in general.
Yeah, I like one of the verses or lines in the song is we can be the change that you want to see, and that to me was one of the most powerful things in that song, because I think, obviously I do this because I, like you, like to connect people and, have people that would not have normally cross paths, like this podcast is doing for us. But then also my young daughter, 20 years old, great business sense, but to kind of hear the for her generation, it's all up to ourselves as leaders. There's not one leader. There's people that are leading teams of people all over the world that need to be a great leader. You have to inspire future leaders. So yeah, that song was awesome for that.
It's so true. I love that. Well, and I was super inspired by my dad, who he passed a couple of years ago, but he was somebody who he was a photographer by trade. And so he loved his profession. So I grew up being around somebody who just loved what he did, which was very influential. But also he always was very much a community builder and a big environmentalist. And he was always quietly working on things and working on initiatives. And so I wrote about him in my last book, Body of Work, where for 30 plus years, he and my bonus mom, Dee, my stepmom, I call her my bonus mom, they and a few other community volunteers bought a 100-year-old school, and over 30 years as volunteers raising money collectively in their small community of 200 people in Port Costa, slowly redid that building and made it into a community center. So it's so neat. I love the connection that you have as father and daughter. And I know for me, it was extremely significant to be really connected with my dad at work. So I was extra happy to see the format and to meet you both in that relationship, because it was a very important thing for the formation of who I am. I love my mom too.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that though, because working with him every day, he is very passionate about everything he does, which makes me obviously more interested in it as well. Since he loves it, I have grown to as well.
It's so cool. Yeah. Imagine if every day, like your dad's like, oh, work is so horrible. And my coworkers and he's just like, ugh, work is horrible.
I'm just going to feel the same thing naturally with that. So,
well, my dad, worked for the city of Elgin, was a union laborer. My mom worked for the city, and, they're always talking to me about when I'm going to start thinking about retirement, because they know I'm a serial entrepreneur and I'm always doing things. And I said, guys, I'm so happy with what I do. I don't think about retirement. Like I wake up wanting to do what I do because I don't feel like it's work. And, hopefully for her, she realizes that everybody has to pick their own path. But for me, I just hope that, I wish everybody could find that type of path, and just wake up in the morning and just feel happy to do what they need to get done, and not see it as like something they have to clock into, but see the change they're making or inspiring, So yeah, but I mean, one of the questions first one would be, tell us about young Pam and your family background. So you kind of already started to get into it with your dad. You said you love your mom also. So let's go right into that. Let's learn a little bit more about because we all are just an accumulation of life experience. So let's learn about young Pam a little first.
Isn't that the truth? Yes, absolutely. So I grew up in a town called San Anselmo, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's a really beautiful place with beautiful hiking trails and everything there. And my parents actually divorced when I was 5. So of course that was a difficult thing for that to happen at that time. But one of the things that I really appreciated very much about my parents is that they never do I remember hearing ever during my entire youth any disparaging thing that my dad said about my mom or my mom said about my dad. As an adult, of course, I realized, that must have been so hard, when you're going through that divorce, and to know what that means. But from their perspective, they really were putting our own emotional needs ahead of theirs. Of course, privately, I'm sure they had their conversations with their friends, as you need to do when you're going through a hard time. But it was a great modeling for me at an early age of, interestingly, seeing how even when you can face something that is extremely emotionally challenging, you can approach it in a way that has ethics. You can do it in consideration for, even where folks have to make the difficult decision of separating, that you still are looking for ways to, be connected, be parents, be a family. And I think for my sister, my brother, and I, it did have some financial implications. Marin County, which is where San Anselmo is a pretty wealthy county. But we didn't. My parents moved there really, really early on. They actually paid like $23,000 for a house in 1963 that now I'm sure would be, probably over $1 million, just the way that the real estate has appreciated. But having a financial challenge with my parents being divorced meant that me and my brother and my sister all started working really early. So I started working at age 12 at Swenson's Ice Cream. I was a dishwasher. I made $1.50 an hour. I told that to my kids the other day. They were like, $1.50 an hour. We're like, yep. And I very proudly still say, probably to the, regret of all my family around me, I was assistant manager by age 14. I don't think I was even legally allowed to work, but I received Employee of the Month twice, which I'm still very proud of. Right. And it taught me so much about just about commerce, about working as a team, about hard work, about ice cream. I still love ice cream. And my sister and my brother both worked at King Henry VIII, which was a fast food restaurant. So they started at 13 and they worked. So all of us worked our way through college. So, our folks, of course, did what they could to support. But primarily, we really made that happen ourselves. So that was something I think that was really important, formative thing. And as I said, one of the big lessons I learned, I still did have a happy childhood. I had lots of friends. I was really interested in the outdoors. I was a very social person. And so I really just enjoyed, we'd go out on adventures. At that time, I remember being like 7 years old and riding my bike up to Phoenix Lake, which is one of my favorite places. Like at 7, I think of that now, like I'd never have let my 7-year-old, ride a bike by themselves. But that's the way that it was in the 70s. So I just, do you remember that? You look a little younger than I am, but I'm going to be 54 this month. But it's like, we just did stuff like that. We're like, we'd take off as a group all day. Our parents would have no idea where we were. And then we'd come back just about dark.
Yeah. So I'm 41, but it's funny because I shook my head because there's a study that with every decade of people, we bring our radius tighter and tighter. People are more concerned, and sometimes for not even having a reason of concern. It's just, it's something that somebody did a study on it. And I actually wish I knew the actual mileage that parents like try to pull their kids in. And now I think with technology, we're starting to try to boot them out the door again, saying like, go outside and breathe the fresh air. Minus the COVID stuff right now, but so yeah, it's kind of interesting, but yeah, anyways, continue on. I just had to throw that in there. But.
Yeah, no, it's really true. So, I mean, that I know that just growing up like that, and I grew up in the same house. So I was in the same house for my whole childhood up until 16. When I was a senior in high school, I was an exchange student to Switzerland. I went to Neuchâtel, Switzerland for the year. And that started me down on a path of doing a lot of international travel. So I went to a really small college that was focused on international studies called Royal College West. And so I spent my sophomore year in Mexico and my senior year in Colombia, in Bogota. And then I went to Brazil after that because I had started training capoeira, which is Afro-Brazilian martial art. So I kind of went from this being in a smaller town, same house all the time, pretty homogenous white suburban area to really expanding and just becoming much more of an adventurous traveler in
I would say you're
adulthood.
You're very well traveled, and I did see that you have a brown belt. So you can.
I have a black belt actually. I have a black belt in
a black
MMA.
Belt now. So my research was old apparently. Google did me wrong in this one, but
That's right.
but congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So by studying abroad, what do you think that did for you now? I mean, you had to be able to tie so many life experiences because you have to be, from what I would hear, very independent. You're kind of off on your own. You're away from family. You have to make new friends. So explain that a little bit.
Yeah. No, it was an amazing experience. It was something that just made me grow so much, being in a totally different environment. So in high school, I was with a host family. It was a wonderful host family that I stayed with. But all my classes were in French. So I had 11 classes, including chemistry and history and Italian and French, which was very confusing, by the way. But so just the brain power. The Swiss are legendary for being very diligent and studied. And I was coming from like hippie Northern California. And so it really shifted me into a different appreciation for formal education. When I first got to class, everybody would bring out their little pencil holders and they had rulers. They took these impeccable notes. And it was just like such an interesting, different experience from what I was used to in school. So I really developed an appreciation just for a different kind of education. And then in Switzerland in particular, because it is such an international place, I also met students from all over the world. And that really got me excited. I had a really good friend from Ghana, from Venezuela. And it just began to open my mind to so many other places in the world. So I think primarily what was really important is there was a quote from Anais Nin that I wrote down when I was 16, when I was an exchange student, that's still so true today, which is we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. And so just our own worldview, if we don't have any experience of stepping outside of that and understanding that people may have a very legitimate reason to see the world the way they do, then we just get really stuck in forming our own idea of, well, this is the way the world is, or this is the way business is, or this is the way that you should operate. And I think having a variety of experiences early on and being in different countries and just seeing the amazing resilience and connection and culture. I know in Mexico, that was so formative for me of really deeply getting to know the Mexican people, the Mexican culture, just the love and connection and hard work. What was interesting is I lived for the first part of my stay, I lived in Morelia, which is in a city with a host family. And then the second part of the stay, I lived in a small village in Michoacan called La Colonia Benito Juarez with a farming family. And I began to see these connections through generations because my dad's family, my grandparents had been chicken and peach farmers in Yuba City, California, which is up in the Sacramento Valley. And so I began to meet people in the village where I was staying who had been farm workers. Braceros officially was a program they had starting in World War II, where they would bring farm workers in that continued like through the 60s. And then of course, we've had lots of farm laborers that I know were active in my grandparents' farm, and that my dad grew up with so many of the workers and told so many stories. So it was like having this connection where all of a sudden beginning to see from a different perspective, like what life was like, what the opportunities were like for folks there. I remember my mom came and visited me when I was there, and or actually we had come together. It was after I had done World Study, and we came back to do a visit, and I had sent them a letter telling them that we were coming. And so we arrived there, which is, takes a little bit, go to Mexico City, take a bus, take another bus, to get there. And we arrived, and we went out to the fields where they were farming their corn and beans. And they were like, oh, how are you? And they stopped and, they greeted us and everything, and let's go up to the house. And we were there probably for like a half of the afternoon. And I said, did you get my letter? And they were like, no, what letter? So they asked.
This was a surprise visit for them.
It was a surprise, and my mom and I were laughing. We were like, "Can you imagine in our like city life what it would be like if people just showed up at our doorstep unexpected?" We would be like, "Oh man, I have an appointment and I have to get to work, and it's so complicated." And they were just so gracious. So I know from my mom's perspective, having that experience with me, she said it really helped her to understand and have empathy for the Mexican people that she saw and that she knew within California, which is where she still is.
Yeah, something for us, like, so we're definitely not as well traveled, and growing up, I was
maybe yet, right?
Yeah. I was a family of 5, so my parents, like, we didn't have a lot of means to travel in the first place. But something that I found, especially now that we've gotten so involved in automation, like one of the robots we bring in are from Switzerland, and so I'm dealing with all these different people, Husqvarna, Swedish, in America, and you brought up how, we don't see things how they are, we see them how we are, is Americans think we're so far ahead in the world, but it's because we're not well traveled, so then you go to these other places in the world, and we only perceive the world to be as what we see in a picture or a snapshot, but we really don't have a clue how other people live, So I love hearing like these experiences you had, because I think you're painting a very good picture. So, of just, it's like you have to get out there and experience things, and I encourage that.
Right. Where you have the opportunity. I know we can't really travel right now, but I hope, for your daughter and for you that, down the road, it is such a illuminating and wonderful experience. And to me, if you're asking about how some of those early formative experiences really shaped my worldview today and who I am, I think as a community builder, as somebody, my husband is Navajo, so I'm in a cross-cultural marriage, and so he grew up on the reservation, in the Navajo reservation, so I have wonderful in-depth connection with his culture. So as a part of my lived experience is always like living with one foot in each culture. Yeah. And then also in our community, there are people that come from so many different backgrounds. So what it feels to me like, as somebody who is building community, building connections, and helping people to build business, is just like more expansive. It's feeling that connection of being more connected with more people. I don't feel afraid, of anybody. Yeah. There's that warmth. Pretty much anybody who happens to be walking down the street is like, oh my gosh, you're just like my best friend or my cousin or the person I stayed with here. You have that expanded feeling of we are family, because we actually are. We're biologically all family. We're all related. Yeah. And so the more that you have that kind of feeling and you live with that feeling, it's very comforting. It's very expansive. And so that is an experience that I love to be sharing with people who sometimes might be afraid of other people, or, like, why do we need to worry? Why can't we just make everybody be exactly like us? And to me, I just say, boy, we are missing out on so much if you lose the opportunity to hear other people's stories, to look at the world from a different perspective. It actually makes me feel so much like stronger, more comforted, and more connected, as opposed to like afraid and just like trying to hold on to my own, whatever piece of the pie I have.
Yeah. Well, and we've only spoken for 20 minutes, and I can already know, I already see this is how you're such a good leader, and how you can speak. Because to be a good leader, you have to be willing to understand other people. And so I picked that up literally within the first 20 minutes of our conversation. I feel like anybody could walk in front of you and you'd be able to pick up, their culture, their background, and try to figure out their best path and how you could help them along it. That's like what I'm picking up right away,
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So any former mentors or bosses you had, I say boss, but I really should say leader, mentors, teachers, what are some life takeaways that you got through your 20s, 30s that, brings you to writing books and doing all the things you're doing,
One of my early professors, Jeff Unsicker, who was a professor of international development. So I have a very long name for my major in college. It was International Service and Development with a focus in non-formal education as a tool for economic change.
That might be one of the longest ones I've ever heard. If we gave prizes on that on the podcast, I think we could give it away right now.
So. I would win. I would totally win. What's so funny about it is actually with what me and my husband are doing now at the Main Street Learning Lab is basically that, right? Using community building, using non-formal education, which is really grassroots community-led education as a tool for social and economic change. So how hilarious that I'm actually doing things related to my major. But what was interesting of learning about international development, which I did as part of my major from Jeff Unsicker, who was my professor, there was one thing he did once that I'll never forget. And he was on, and probably didn't even have whiteboards at that point. It must have been a chalkboard. And so we were studying all these different models of international development about ways that economic change happen in countries and so forth in preparation for going abroad in our sophomore year that every student did as part of that school. And so he said, here's the theory. And he drew a very straight line. And then he said, and here's the reality. And he just took his chalk and he went, whoa, just made this big tangled mess. And it was really funny. We all were really laughing about it. When we went in country, that's when we realized we're trying to sort through that one lens we had learned that from an academic perspective in terms of how change happens. And then all of a sudden you're in country and you see and feel the experience of how complicated things can be. And you're learning another language and all of that. That I remember having that same kind of experience as I moved through my career. And interestingly, international development and models of international development are very parallel with organizational development and looking at how change happens within organizations, which is what I did probably for about 15 years of my career. So I had similar experiences sometimes. You might come in and say, oh, okay, here's the neat way that we can build a positive culture and that we can, build the leadership capacity, the senior executives, and then you get into the reality sometimes of what it means to make change and resistance that people have and all these dimensions that you didn't expect. So that was really important of just acknowledging the fact that while it is important to be learning frames of reference in doing work, that really when you're in the field, that is where you learn actually how to get work done. And having the perspective of having been on the ground in Mexico, in Colombia, where I worked in Bogota, which at the time, I think of it now as a parent, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I was your daughter's age, I think. I was 19 or 20. And that's when they bombed the American embassy. They kidnapped and assassinated the attorney general. If you've watched any of I think it's Narcos or one of the Netflix series on drug trafficking. It was totally happening right then when I was there in Colombia, a bit oblivious to it because I was working in a daycare center actually in an education project on the outskirts of Bogota. My mom, I'm sure we didn't have social media or hardly the internet, thankfully, right? So she probably didn't really know what was happening.
Yeah, she would have been down there on a plane bringing you home, I'm sure. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But, you have all that happening. And here I was, this fresh-faced, 19, 20-year-old, and just recognizing the history of the Colombian people in general, which was just so deep. They had so much conflict, but they also were the most loving, fun, amazing, like warm people. I loved Colombia. I mean, I danced salsa straight every day for like 6 months. It was wonderful. But, that's one example of something I think that was a really significant lesson. The other thing that I think about a lot was actually from a mentor when I was at Barclays Global Investors, and she was a consultant. Her name is Mary Jo Potter. And this was something I've probably quoted to so many female entrepreneurs through the years. But I was talking to her, I was making a bit of a career shift. And so I was evaluating different job opportunities. And she said, okay, well, what's the kind of salary that you're going to ask for and negotiate? And I was like, at that point, I was like, I probably, $50,000 or something. That's kind of all I need. I don't really need a lot. Growing up with modest means, we weren't the kind of family that was showcasing money. I was sort of used to not having money, how I grew up. And so she looked at me and she said, you need to charge and you need to advocate for the amount of money that is really like requisite for people at your level, and particularly other men. Because if you don't do that, then people aren't going to respect your skills, and they may think less because of you not, charging as much as actually is merited within the market. She said, but here's the thing, you can do whatever you want with the money. So you could give it all away. You could do whatever it is that you want with it. And at that point, I was the volunteer executive director for a capoeira group, an Afro-Brazilian capoeira group. So I was super involved. During the day, I was in corporate, in nylons and pearls. In the evenings and the weekends, I was in my, capoeira gear in the city neighborhoods, working with youth, a lot of youth who were in gangs and really difficult situations. And so I had such a big part of a social conscience and passion for wanting to make things better. And I saw that correlation. It was just really illuminating for me, where I think before I had the feeling that was, not necessarily accurate, but that people who had lots of money or who put a focus just on money weren't caring, or were just focused on money, were greedy, didn't care about social causes. And that's not a fair characterization. It's really minimizing, right? People can be really different. But I did realize and make the correlation that when I am charging what I'm worth in the market, and when I am growing my revenue, then it does mean that I can have more opportunities to do what I want to do within my business. And that was something that was very empowering, that I've talked with a lot of people about, because it's not for nothing that we have a pay gap, right? A gender pay gap. There's all kinds of factors we can look at to what contributes to that. But there's also a lot of socialization that can happen, in particular with women. And it's really weird. It's very subtle. Like sometimes you don't even notice it in the way that you're socialized, in the way that you can begin to make every decision where you're just like, oh yeah, I don't really want to like go for it and go really hard into that negotiation for salary or for a client project. But then what it can mean over time is that you really start to lose a lot of ground relative to your male peers. I love men. No offense, Joe. Love you. Love my husband. Love my dad, my brother. But I'm like, I also know us women know a lot. And it can be frustrating to see sometimes where women are making so much less than men. So there's the individual side that we work on to develop that skill. And then there is the systemic thing that we look at, where what the research shows is often that when women are, especially around the world, when the money is in the hands of women, often we do make sometimes investment decisions that are more focused on the overall well-being of community, right? Investing in education and things like that might grow. It's a generalization, but the research actually backs up that it is a little bit different sometimes than how men, as an aggregate, make investments.
Yeah. So, I mean, as an entrepreneur, business owner, father of a brilliant daughter, one of the things that I've always said that would be best for men and women working together is just to understand we're different, but together we create a better outcome. That's one of the things I've always thought in my mind. So, at a young age, when she was young, taking her to volleyball, which now is probably starting to make more sense as we do these types of podcasts to her. Mm-hmm. But I would tell her, when I see men and women, men's typically, we have a little bit less of a filter. So we say what we want to say in the moment. So what I found as someone who employs people is when a man wants a raise, they have zero issue coming and saying, hey, I want more money. Now, typically, they never have the ability to back it up. Men will come to me and say, I'm worth more. And I say, why? And they go, because I've been here a long time and I'm worth more. And I'm like, but what have you contributed? Like, what are you doing? Have you moved up or have you just put in time? Because I pay you for your time. You get paid per hour. But what have you done to grow yourself to help me grow my organization? So men will come to me with zero reasoning. They just want more money. Women, I feel like they take time and they wait for the reason, but then they start to, and this is my opinion, so it could be wrong or right, but they second guess or doubt their reasoning sometimes. And that's the biggest, one of my things, if I were to speak to advocate for women, is one of the biggest reasons there's a pay gap. Like, don't second guess yourself, because men to a fault won't second guess ourselves, and we'll make an ass of ourselves sometimes because of it. Whereas women, I think, do it too much, So, you want to elaborate on some of the things I used to do, even driving?
Yeah, I mean, every time we'd be driving and be like, all right, what do you want to go, straight or left? Like, they both lead to the same place. He's just put me on the spot to make decisions, and then I don't know, throw me off sometimes. I'd be like, left, and then he'd go left. I'd be like, no, straight. I don't know. I could never actually pick one, but now that I'm a little bit older, I see why he did it, and now I'm a little bit better at making decisions. I think so, at least. Maybe not.
Well, because so what I was
on the spot decisions, I guess.
What I was trying to teach her is, as a man, I know sometimes I make decisions that are not the best. It turns out to be not the best decision, but I never question my decision. I make it in the moment, and because a lot of times people are looking to me for a decision. So by making zero decision, I have a bunch of people not doing anything. There's no motion. Okay. And to me, it's easier to redirect. As long as we're in motion, it's easier for me to deflect and get back on track than not moving anywhere in time. And that was one of the things that I would try to make her realize is, I want to raise a future president, if she wanted to be, of the United States,
Right.
But I feel like, unfortunately, by spending as much time with my daughter as I do, this doesn't happen a lot. A lot of times it's fathers and sons hanging out, and there's not this like interaction, which I'm so proud that we have and so happy about, So anyways,
I totally hear you.
This is your moment, not mine. So but I wanted to elaborate.
No, I love it. I love it. I mean, it's great. That's the best thing, to have a conversation, right, about it, because I agree. It's there is a part, I always see things just the way that I'm trained, and in my experience of what I've seen is there can be overarching, like, systemic things that are influencing things at play. And then there can be socialization that can happen overall, just messages that we get depending on the different cultural backgrounds that we have.
Yeah.
And then also the way that gets translated into practice. So it's always, as much as we can, to when we can begin to recognize a pattern that's not necessarily a positive one, then how can we change that? How can we advocate for ourselves, And then sometimes you can bump up and you can start to see the systemic issue that's coming and say, okay, and at the same time, let's change some of the things we recognize that intentionally or not can be like keeping that socialization happening. What I'm really happy about is my daughter, Angie, who's 12 now. She's the opposite of me. She's always like, what are you doing? Like, are you getting paid for this? Like, why aren't you charging more? And she's just totally, she's my money marketing coach. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry. They were really nice. And, and she's like, come on now, like, get it together. Let's up your rates. So I really appreciate, she has just such a clarity in how she is. And she has a big heart too, of course. But those are ways I think we all help each other.
Yeah. Well, and I hope you agree, but I think in general, when it comes to this, I do believe we're moving in the right direction, at least in our country. You could probably elaborate more to this, but for some of these gender gaps, I think that
little by little, by little, for sure.
So I mean, even hearing you say what your daughter says, I think, like, I know for myself, I experienced my mom working with the city of Elgin, brilliant woman, didn't have a college education, but she had a lot of life skills that worked really well with what she did. And it used to bother the heck out of me that they wouldn't give her a raise because she didn't have a degree, so they wouldn't bring her to that next level. Because to me, it was just an excuse to not give my mother, who was a woman, what she deserved, And I would always tell her, like, Mom, I'm telling you, if there was a man that didn't have a college education, he would walk in and say, I don't care, bump me to that next level or I will leave. And you need to just tell them, bump me or I leave, And the thing was, my mom wouldn't do it. So she just said, okay, because she loved what she did, So yeah, so I agree. I think that it has to change, and I think that you had great advice there. So continue going though. More mentor advice that you got.
Yeah, I think on the more on the entrepreneur path. So I think the college advice I had more of my mid-career when I was an employee, and then for the entrepreneur advice, when I started my blog in 2005, Escape from Cubicle Nation, which was my first foray in leaving management consulting and doing entrepreneur consulting, because I had so many people who were asking me how I did it, how I quit my corporate job to start my own business. And so I started that blog and I connected to Guy Kawasaki, who's a venture capitalist and an author who wrote some great books like Art of the Start, and Enchantment. He's now the product evangelist for Canva. If you ever use that great app that you can make your own graphics for Canva, he was the original evangelist for Apple Computer. And so I reached out to him when I wrote a blog post, and this was very early on in my blogging career, and nobody had any idea who I was. And I wrote a post, and I just on a whim sent it to him because I had been reading about him and he sounded really interesting and I thought he might like the post. It was called An Open Letter to CEOs Across the Corporate World, really based on kind of what I would say if I would imagine that I had assembled a whole number of the corporate executives that I'd been working with for so many years, and sometimes who just refuse to really create positive work environments and to center the needs of their employees. And so I was seeing so many more people who were leaving because they were just tired of being in an environment that didn't support them, that I wrote this very clear, more like a manifesto about what they needed to do or risk losing employees who I would happily help escape and start their own businesses. And so I sent it to Guy, and it was about 10 o'clock at night. And he emailed me right back. And he said, I had never met him before. And he said, this is great. Can you expand it a little bit? Which I did. And then he posted it on his blog the next day. And it went massively viral because he had he had a really huge platform. And the people who were in his community were very interested and connected with what I was talking about. And so it was just this wonderful experience. If that usually is about once in a lifetime where you really go viral. At that time, it was in 2006. And it really was the thing that piqued interest eventually in my publisher, Penguin Portfolio, approaching me about doing a book. But during that time in connecting with him, first of all, I appreciated so much that he was always so open to people who were completely unknown, right? That, he's this big, powerful person who's, gets big speaking fees and so forth. But he was very encouraging of me. And during that time when I was getting all the traffic from different people, and he was, checking in to see how I was. And he just was very generous, but not always in a public way. He wouldn't necessarily come out and say, that he was being supportive. He just was very humble in the way that he just helped behind the scenes. And as I've now known him over a great number of years, he particularly does it with women entrepreneurs. And I just really appreciate that. He's a dad too. He has, sons and daughters, but he very specifically has reached out to provide support quietly to women entrepreneurs and to really encourage them. So that to me was just really important to see modeled, to see that you can have quite a big platform, but you always want to be making room for new people in the space. And we actually did, after I got the book deal, we did a panel together at South by Southwest, which is a big conference in Austin, Texas. And it was about blog to book, of people like myself who had gone from having a blog to getting a book deal. And there was somebody in the audience who asked the question, like, how do you get attention of the big influencers, of like people like yourself who can, supposedly like make or break somebody's career? And he said, people look at me and they say I may have the Midas touch, as if everything I touch turns to gold. He said, they have it wrong. I only touch gold. So that advice was so important. And I've told that story so many times to people. When you look at your responsibility for when you do want your work to get out in the world, when you do want to be connecting with people who you do respect and admire, who have a bigger platform, that your responsibility, they're not going to make you. You need to do your work to create great work so that they see you as being connected and furthering to their mission. As an author now, a couple times over and working on my next book, what we want is we do want to see our ideas out there in the world. It's super exciting to see people, of other generations who are putting the ideas to work and doing their own, flavor of it. We all need each other that way. You can't have some big influencer who doesn't also rely on people who were following them and following their work. So that was something I think that was so important, where you can spend so much time just like jumping up. It's almost like you see somebody famous in a big crowd and you're like trying to catch their attention and hoping and waiting that that's the way you're going to be seen. It rarely ever works that way. And it creates the most awkward kind of conversation, because basically to somebody who you don't know at all, you're trying to catch their attention and basically have them bless your work, as opposed to approaching it more as like a less experienced equal, where you're like, you know what? I may have been at that point. I had my kids were tiny. I was a new blogger. I was beginning on my journey, but I was like, I've created something that's really resonant and what's really important. And I so respect your work, but I respect it as a less experienced equal. We can still have a deep conversation about the work. And I'm not just going to be in fangirl mode the whole time, right? Because that's awkward for everybody, right? Just to be like, oh my God, Joe, you're so amazing. Oh, you're so amazing. You're so amazing. And you're like, yeah, I know. And like, you're like waiting to move on and go somewhere else.
Well, no, I mean, it's hard to take a compliment sometimes. And, it's when you brought that up, and I mean, that's like, that quote gave me chills with, the I only touch gold, because people have, obviously we've been successful with automation, Julia and I have, and some people have said, oh man, you got the Midas touch with that. And it's actually great to say how you said it, because like for us, we're taking automation that exists in other areas of the world and we're just introducing it here. So we don't even feel like we're that special. And now I actually am going to use that a lot, because we're just touching gold.
Yeah. Like these correlates to exactly what we're doing. I mean, this is what makes life, in my opinion, just amazing, because it's like you say something that was a big inspiration to you, and now this is like an inspiration to us, that this person said to you, because sometimes we find ourselves being like, what is it that makes us different? All we do is see something that other people don't see, but we're just introducing that gold to people, So
that's it. And that is a skill, to look through everything, to see opportunity, and then to actually implement it.
Yeah.
That's what I'll say as a business coach. Everybody can have the world's greatest idea. Everybody can see opportunity, but can you actually translate that into a real operational reality and get other people on board and get other people to buy it? That's a whole different situation. And it's hard.
Well, it is, because sometimes you bring that vision to other people and then they want to squash it. They're like, oh, it doesn't work, or it won't work here, or how many things are you going to be involved in? I mean, I look at your resume and, you're writing books and you're coaching people, and, it's like you're a very involved woman, but somehow you're juggling it, right? Because it all ties in my opinion, when I look at everything you're doing, to an envelope or an umbrella,
Yeah.
And that's the way her and I feel, it's like when we see another piece of automation that we want to bring to Automated Outdoor Solutions, which is our venture we do together. People are like, well, you got to focus on one thing, but it's like, no, it's all kind of the same thing. And now that you said that, it's like, we're just seeing these little golden pieces all over the place that we're putting in the, so you awesome. I will credit you for it forever. That you
brought the credit Guy Kawasaki for telling me, and then you can credit me for telling you.
Good. All right. Awesome. Yeah. So the let's see. So sorry, you actually gave such good stuff. I actually lost track in the question.
Well, okay, here. So you talked about your lessons then and advice. What's the biggest challenge in your career then that you've encountered or like through everything you've done?
I think for me the biggest challenge is often at any stage of work that I do, that I like the idea of having a bigger umbrella, having a specific idea of what, like, how your life is connected to what it is that you're doing in your business. And the basic way I define success, my definition of success, is to enjoy your life while you're living it. Like, to actually really enjoy it, where every day to wake up grateful, to any decision that I say yes to, a podcast interview, a coaching call, or whatever it is, writing a book, that I truly am doing it willingly. Doesn't mean that it's not difficult sometimes, but that I'm doing it out of deliberate intention. And then also in the way that I spend my time being a mom and being a wife is in also making sure that my own the rhythm of work that I do, the availability that I have to my kids is also the way that I want it while they're here. Because now they're 12. My daughter's almost 13. Our son is 15, and then my bonus son is 33. But for the kids that my husband and I've had together, for Josh and Angie, I'm like, oh my gosh, Josh is in his sophomore year. Like, it's just 3 more years before he's going to be going away to college. And you just realize how limited time is. And I think especially here in the quarantine, of just recognizing, like, I've so enjoyed being home. It's been the first time in probably 10 years. I've always had an outside office for like the last 10 years. Some of it was because when the kids were really little and I was like writing my book and doing radio interviews and all that kind of stuff, they would be with our babysitter downstairs and like somehow escape, right? And like come upstairs. Yeah. And it was just really hard to be concentrating. But I recognized, I've just really seen an experience through this time in quarantine of just how much I enjoy my family. I've always known that, but recognizing the precious gift it is to be spending time together, right? And so with that, there is that in terms of the challenge. I think it's always the creative tension that sometimes I'll feel where I can see peers of mine or colleagues that might scale their business to a different level, right? Or they may be producing more. It takes me about 5 years between books. And I have people who, finish one and they turn around and finish the other and hit the New York Times list. And, there's times where I can get caught up a little bit in that. Like, geez, I'm smart too. Like, why can't I do that? But when I back it into being conscious about decisions that I make at any given time, it's owning the choices that I make. And especially now, there's just a lot of time where I realize I am so thankful just to be spending the time with my family. It's so wonderful to be having them around. To my daughter and I are going to go for a drive this evening. Like, we love just to like go for a drive, listen to music. There's like beautiful desert. Do you like that too?
Yeah. So we do this. I have to say, this is one of the reasons that inspired this whole song thing came up, because we have like our playlist that we listen to when we just go out and drive, that we turn on, and we'll just listen to music and we'll talk about the things we're going to do and accomplish in like the next week. Like, there's literally days where it's like we'll get done working and she'll be like, let's go for a drive, and I'm like, let's go, and we hop in the car and we just do it. So
I am with you. Like, it's so fun. And there's so much obviously that we can't do right now. We can't really be traveling to like exotic locations, but just to do something, like take a drive and to just feel what it feels like to be like truly enjoying life and to be grateful and to love your loves, as one of my dear friends and clients talks about. She tragically lost her. Well, she didn't lose her husband. She always says, I didn't lose him. He died. She's like, we talk about losing somebody as if they're just lost and not found. But her husband died of a heart attack when he was across the country in a training conference. He was a chef. And so through that experience, I've just been so moved by her processing and just recognizing, as she's always saying, like, to really love your loves, to be present, to be appreciating, little doggies, as you can see behind me, the humans in your life, your neighbors, to really be present for that is something that's true joy. And I'll tell you, I've had the great joy and experience of working with a lot of like really famous people, really rich people. I've been behind the scenes and just seen so much through my travels and the work that I've done. And there definitely are some people who happen to have a whole bunch of money and maybe be famous and are also happy. And, Guy Kawasaki is kind of an example of that, who's down to earth, present for his family. But I've also seen a whole bunch of people who are on this incessant, just the treadmill where they're constantly looking for whatever the next thing is, never satisfied. In some cases are really terrible to each other. In other cases are, just not being right, messing around on their spouse, or, what I mean? Just caught up in this whole life that we can admire and that we set as the standard for what it is that it means to be like a realized entrepreneur. And that's why I just try to really not pay attention to those things, to think about at different stages of your life and career. There can be very different decisions that you make, which is what I talked about in body of work. Like if your life is your body of work, at different stages, depending upon what's going on, you can make different decisions. So you could make a decision for a while to maybe not be scaling so much because you really want to be home and present with your kids. And then maybe, right, they get a little bit older, they're more independent. And then it can be a time where you feel like, all right, this is a time I want to jam out. I want to really focus my energy into building something that's bigger. But it's doing it deliberately and recognizing that usually what most people are after is just the general feeling of well-being, which is like what I have when I wake up in the morning and my husband brings me my coffee and my dogs are snuggling, and then I go hug my kids. And it's like, that's it, man. That's it. That's like, that is it.
Yeah.
What more could I ever want than that?
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, that it resonates well because so Langton Group, I own with my brother, my cousins work there. I do automated outdoor with my daughter. So, talking about like living your best life, or it's like everything that I'm doing with people that I love,
Mm-hmm.
Now I've got a new venture that I'm getting started with, and my fiance is going to be a part of that with Green Magic Homes, so it's like all of these things. It's like I found, because I know I'm always going to be somebody, I wouldn't say I'm on the treadmill, but I'm always looking for how I can like take an idea and run with it, but I typically have been very blessed finding people that will run with me with those ideas so that I'm still around the people that I want to be around all the time,
Yeah.
And I think for me, looking back, like is when she gets older, or even if, I had to chronicle my success, like that's where a lot of it for me personally comes from, is I've been fortunate enough to have people that want to run on that treadmill with me, going off of that type of thought process,
That's right.
So,
I love that. Yeah. And, and there can be a time, there can be a venture where you'd be, whoever you admire, the next, I don't know, Bill Gates, Elon Musk, whatever it is, right? Like how cool would it be? Do I want my next book to hit the New York Times list? Yes, 100%. Like that would be amazing, right?
Yeah.
I would love the ideas to get out there. It's not about just saying, this is the only way that you look at life, but it is to be conscious at different times. And I consider it one of the great blessings of my life and the work that I do is I get to really be behind the scenes. I get to hear the truth for a lot of people about what their life is like. And I'm always just trying to take them on this transformational journey of getting to where they want to be as a person, as a leader, of getting them in alignment with how they want their life to be and their business to be. But it also just demystifies a lot, right? Where you see just, we all admire people. And that's great. I think it's important to have people that we really, that we look up to, but it's I pay really close attention over time. I can appreciate that somebody creates really great work and just think it's amazing. And I call those like a technical mentor. So they might do something that's really amazing, but it's different for me than the High Council of Jedi Knights type of mentors, where not only are they doing amazing work, but they're also living in a way that's really in accordance with my values and that which I admire. So, my High Council of Jedi Knights would be very different than each of yours, because it's about being in alignment with how is somebody really living out, who they are. And that's, it makes a difference to me if I'm taking advice from somebody about my overall life or a strategic direction. I want it to be from a High Council of Jedi Knights person, not just somebody who's going to say, oh, well, you want the quickest path to money? Do this. And sometimes, by the way, violating the very things that really make me who I am. It's funny. I have right now, I'm shopping my book out to publishers. So hopefully by next week, my birthday, actually, we should have an answer to see who will be my home for the new publisher for my next book. But it was really funny because one answer that I got back was, oh, this is a really timely idea. It's a huge, important idea in the business environment. Clearly, Pam has the expertise, the experience, the research to back up the fact that it actually works, that what I'm sharing about building an audience and building your business works in the real world with real people. But they were like, yeah, we just don't really feel like we can sell it because it's kind of based on being authentic, building community, linking your work like with your mission and your purpose. And, we've sort of like done that in the business environment. And I thought it was so funny because I was like, so let me get this straight. This is an important thing that works with real people in the real world, that's based on actually being yourself, having ethics, right? And caring for the community. But because it doesn't sound like a big idea, then it's not something that's going to be a book that we put out there, and it's just, they're not wrong. They're being a publisher, right? They're kind of evaluating based on wanting something that's the big new sexy idea. Yeah. But when you see behind the scenes, sometimes what that actually means is, I could create some edgy book with, the F-bomb and the title and, like, why being a jerk is the best way to get ahead. And like, people be like, oh my God, that's an amazing book. Like, let me buy it.
I'm a jerk. I should buy this book. Yeah.
Exactly. I thought being nice was important. Clearly it's not. And so when you see things like this, then you can realize, like, let me be really thoughtful about not just following advice that gets me to where I want to go financially and where you have big financial goals. I think that's amazing. I love helping my clients make all kinds of money. It's great where that's part of their goal. And then it's also, though, in doing so in a way that's really in accordance with your values. Because I'm not going to say it's easy to make a lot of money, but it's certainly easier if you just sort of set your ethics and your values aside to just focus on capitalizing the most you can from a market. The thing is, it ends up usually making people feel kind of dead inside, and usually not with a bunch of fans or people who care about them around them. Because who wants to be with somebody who's just focused on transactions,
Well, I think we live in a world where ethics, companies that set up good core ethics are very important. A lot of younger kids coming out of school and trying to work at like good workplaces, they're more into core values than anything. So when you're somebody that just chases the money or tries to figure out how to get there the fastest, you're never going to have a sustaining company, because you're going to probably have some horrible ethics. And this is my opinion. So you could achieve money quickly, but the question is, will you sustain it? And so whether or not it's, that you're trying to get there quickly or whatever, because it's always kind of a race, right? There's in the world we live in, it's very competitive. So the race for us is, can we get it out first or the fastest or the best? Okay. But then once it's out there, how do you sustain it? And you only sustain it with good core values and ethics, and in finding people that are as passionate about it as you are. One of the things that I was going to bring up, because I see you're a speaker, you're a writer, how does it all tie in? I mean, does, by speaking in public events and taking off of that, does that help you write the books? Does writing the books help you be a speaker? Like, kind of explain that to us, like tie that in a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I do have a really specific process, and this is different for different kinds of authors. So I'm good friends with amazing authors like Dan Pink, if you know Dan Pink, who wrote Drive and When and a bunch of books with one-word titles. But he's a journalist. He's an amazing, amazing writer. I love his writing. And his main joy is in finding an interesting topic and really researching it and writing something on that can include, academic research, as well as just, looking at trends and so forth. Or Gretchen Rubin, who's another author who had the Happiness Project and the Four Tendencies. And again, she's really a journalist and a writer by trade. So she might write that way. For me, I very specifically, my work and my books come from the work that I do with clients. So I do see a bigger picture, which has really been expanded in a wonderful way since my husband and I started the Main Street Learning Lab in Mesa. Really, the intention of that was to look at how we can play an active role in really connecting and doing ecosystem building within our own community in downtown Mesa, Arizona, where there's all kinds of activity happening. There's ASU, Arizona State, is building a new campus there, all in like digital technology and entrepreneurship and all these cool things that are coming. We have co-working spaces coming. And then we also have a lot of issues that are happening around neighborhoods to make sure that as the growth happens, that we're really integrating, not leaving behind people who have been in those neighborhoods for a long time. A lot of people who have all kinds of different, brick and mortar shops and, auto body shops and parts places and restaurants and all that kind of thing. So in looking at that and looking at sometimes what it is that we need, how to bring education, resources, support to people who are in all kinds of different businesses as a collective is something that's a really interesting activity that I've learned as we've opened the Learning Lab. And then in a day-to-day basis, because I'm always working with individuals in order to grow business, all my ideas come really from doing the work with them and finding out that they're stuck on something. Before I got my book deal with Escape from Cubicle Nation, I had just been writing the blog, and the intention was to get clients. It was, as a way to raise visibility. But this one wonderful client who was a software engineer, Pete, and I meet with folks on Zoom, but he would come and we'd meet at Starbucks. This was, 2005 or something. And he said, I print out every blog post and I'm like categorizing them. He's like, could you just write a book so you can like tie it all together for me? Because I'm kind of tired of printing everything out. He was like one of these very organized people. So that was a good inspiration of wanting to have a coherent way to describe an overall picture. So Escape from Cubicle Nation, the subtitle is From Corporate Prisoner to Thriving Entrepreneur. So helping people to understand specifically the journey of what's involved, with a purpose of either having them decide they're enthusiastically going to want to do it, or when they learn all the work involved would say, you know what, I might be better just staying as an employee. And to me, either one of those is great. I'm not anti-corporate whatsoever. I love my time in corporate. With that, then, body of work came from seeing that there were so many people who were enthusiastic about entrepreneurship, that there started to be this feeling that you're only cool and creative if you work for yourself. And I was like, well, that's not true. Yeah. My brother and sister-in-law are university professors, and they're pretty cool. And people are doing important work all over the place as employees. And by the way, what about the employees you hire to work in your business? Yeah. Are you saying that they're not actually cool and creative?
They're not
the
as
only
cool
one?
As you? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I said, how can I write a book that helps to create a structure for a career that looks at, regardless of what work mode that you're in, if you work for yourself, for somebody else, if you work for a nonprofit, government, you can look at your life as a body of work, and you can do different things and not feel like you just have to choose one particular career ladder or the other, because that's what I saw people struggling with, and then within body of work, there was a chapter about how it is that you begin to connect, build community, and get your work out into the world. So when you know specifically what you want to do, then who's the audience for it? How do you do that audience building? And that's where the next book, The Widest Net, is coming from, are those conversations and the specific work that I do. So I don't feel comfortable writing things that I have not tested and tried with real people. It gives me the stories, it gives me the experience. And there can be some of those times where I'm like, oh, it would be so much easier just to make up some cool, sexy sounding idea. And I could probably like sell the book much easier than trying to sell the book that actually works with real people in the real world based on real ideas, because then you have to sometimes like spin it in a way that sounds like it's, you know, it's really sexy. I think it is sexy to have an idea that actually works.
Yeah,
that's what I would prefer.
Yeah. So are there any, like when you're helping as a mentor now to other businesses and other entrepreneurs, are there any certain type, like, is there one that you prefer over the other? You know what I mean? Like, different fields or businesses, you know, how does that work for you? You know,
to me,
because I noticed on your website, right? I just want to say, PamelaSlim.com. Like I noticed, like there was a couple questions you had on there, so I'm taking that question right off there. You know, like
yeah. I mean, to me, given a lot of my earlier roots of being somebody who is definitely interested in positive social change and, you know, building an equitable world, I get excited when I'm helping to build businesses that either are contributing in a substantial way to creating new tools or resources or, you know, frameworks to really help the world be better and stronger and healthier. You know, so I'll work with people like doctors that are doing really interesting, you know, breakthrough research on the brain and ways that we can, you know, live in a more effective way. I work with a client who's a data scientist who wants to reduce bias in the way that data is collected. So she's created this whole new process and training called We All Count, where she's training people, you know, that work at all kinds of organizations about how to reduce bias and data science. So things like that get me really excited to be working on that. And at the same time, it's where I might be working with somebody who is really deeply passionate about what they're doing, who deeply cares about their community, who is, you know, building something that they're really excited about. I have so many wonderful colleagues that are downtown in our downtown area that I just love, like spending time, you know, helping them grow, be it like a cafe where they're just creating a really wonderful environment for people. The theme, I think, for all of it is doing something that makes a positive change on different levels of scale, right? So I've worked on big scales with people like Susan Cain, who wrote the book Quiet, to launch her Quiet Revolution, which is helping to, you know, have people better understand the power of introverts. But it can also be somebody who's working on a very local scale and is wanting to do something that's really important. If I look at the businesses that I know I just tend to give a pass on, not because they're horrible people or anything, but if there's a business that's just purely transactional of just, hey, how can I create an online business that just my main only focus is just how I can make as much money as quickly as possible, it's just not really interesting to me. I'm like, you know, there's plenty of people who are super great at that, who will get really nerdy about, you know, analytics and Facebook ads and so forth. Like I love online marketing, don't get me wrong. But if the only purpose of the business is just something like, how can I just choose something that I don't even really care about in order to just make a bunch of money, or to have a kind of business that's very transactional. I've seen, unfortunately, through the years of speaking on a lot of stages, I've been behind the stage where somebody might be glowing to the audience and being very warm and loving, and then come off stage and say really disparaging things, right?
Yeah.
Or be like, oh, great, I close like this amount, and just be dismissive. It's, I don't know, some days it feels like a character flaw because I need to be less judgmental. But if I see somebody do that, like ignore a fan who is so excited to come see them, who's like overwhelmed with enthusiasm because they follow their work, and just to see them dismiss the person or, you know, say something disparaging, my respect just immediately drops. I'm like, you don't realize every single person who respects and admires your work deserves respect. And if you don't love the people who you're working with and who you're serving, I feel sad for you.
Yeah.
I feel pretty sad.
Yeah, that's well said. And I agree. You know, there's some people that put on a good show, but you when you see their true colors, sometimes, unfortunately, it can be off-putting. So I don't think you're being judgmental. You're just being, your eyes are wide open. That's all it sounds like.
I'm being judgmental. I call, I call it.
You're owning it. You're just like, screw it. I'm judgmental. I guess I am too sometimes.
I'm discerning. And it's an example. It is not, people have different sets of values. So what I want for people to find the mentors, the resources, the communities that serve them, that are really in alignment, right? Not fighting to try to like pull somebody over to my side, because it never works. Like, it's better that they go somewhere else. Of course, as long as somebody's not actively harming others, right? There's things that we just need to stand up, of course, and stop from happening. But in general, if somebody's like, no, I just want to make as much money as quickly as I can, I'm like, that's awesome. Like, let me refer you to somebody else that can help you to do that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we're fortunate with what we're doing, because, with doing automation, we are, I think, helping businesses that have a labor issue. We are reducing carbon footprint. We're attracting young people, because younger people are like technology. So I one of the things that I think her and I, why it's so easy to be passionate for us and about our business is, it's more than just trying to make as much as we can quickly. We can see the impact that we can make. And this is, kind of why I asked the question, because, it's like when I saw online, I was thinking, man, I could probably utilize your services to help us scale our business, in these local areas. Or in all the other local areas, because right now we're in the Chicago market, basically, so. So that's why I asked the question,
you can always hit me up, of course, but like I said, it's more, it's about, the quality and the reasons for being in business. And that's the thing about small business, which is amazing. And I think it was a 2016 SBA study said that small business, by their definition, which is up to 500 employees and $10 million in annual revenue, creates 99.7% of all new jobs.
Yeah.
Right. It's 54% of the non-farm US GDP. So when you look at what a significant role that we play, it's funny because when we talk about business in the news and so forth, we're really just talking about the really big players and really big organizations. And again, they're important parts of our ecosystem. Like, I do not hate on them. I work sometimes with, in partnership with larger companies that tend to serve the small business market.
Yeah.
But, I've seen so clearly in the last 4 years of work that we've done on Main Street, like what it means when you can create a downtown where people can come. It's very like Norm and Cheers kind of thing, right? Where it's like you walk down the street and people know your name and you feel welcome and you can go places where you feel like you have a sense of belonging. Like that's so meaningful when you look at then what it means for families to grow up there and to, build the connection. People are making a good living. They're growing their business as they feel connected to a community. I think it's just it's the best thing ever. I really love it.
Yeah, I think that might be the only good thing that could come out of the stuff with coronavirus right now is, since people can't interact as much, they're almost longing for the interaction that they were taking for granted until we couldn't, And now I've even seen community-wise, there seems to be this push for like having more self-sustaining communities. Like things have almost pulled local, like again, because people want to support that local restaurant that they can see is horribly affected by being closed or running at 30% capacity or 50%, depending on the local ordinances. So, sometimes I think every now and then we need the little reset button to kind of put things back into perspective, So
I think so too. And and hopefully we also like need to help each other to get through it, because people have been so differently affected by it that, it goes again, like when we know each other and we know how we can innovate and in order to get through a hard time, that's really important. Yeah.
Well, in closing, so what's one of the things that you want to be most known for as a person then, for you,
legacy wise, it's really funny. I always tell one of my clients named the relationships that are formed by people who meet through me. So I've had either through work that I do online, I'm very often introducing people to each other, or if I, run live events, people come and they meet together. One of my clients, Kelly, called it the Pamily. So she said, "Oh yeah, I met through the Pamily," which sort of sounds like a cult, which is why I'm like a little hesitant to share it. I'm not a cult leader. I'm a very like non-controlling cult leader. But I love that. Next year is going to be my 25-year anniversary, and where all goes well, it also will be the time where my book comes out, like in late August or September. 25-year anniversary of my business. 16-year anniversary of my marriage. So one of the ideas that I have is to be highlighting 25 of the relationships and connections that were formed by people meeting each other through the work that I have done. Because when I sit back and look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's right. I forgot that I introduced Mike and Brian, who have now become like dear best friends, and their families are all connected, or people who started business ventures together. So that to me is really, I feel like my greatest accomplishment, is first just creating the kind of home and family where my kids feel loved and honored for who they are, and growing up in a happy home, feeling like they have lots of aunties and uncles, which they do, right? Navajo culture, you call a lot of extended relatives, aunties and uncles. And so they literally have like the greatest circle of people around them who can be supporting them on their journey and helping them to do, what they need to do. And then also to have that feeling that because of the work that I've done as a community builder, I have connected people, ideas, resources, right? Made things happen. It goes to a quote that I think I also wrote down in my exchange year, which was from Lao Tzu. And it says, the greatest leaders, when their work is done, the people say, we have done it ourselves. And that is the kind of leadership that I really love, where I know that I've played a role, and I know I play an important role in the growth and development, but it's the people who have actually done the work feel like they really have done it, because they have, right? In partnership, they're the ones that did the hard work. They're the ones that grew their business, and they feel better, stronger, and more capable. And then we're really standing shoulder to shoulder, where we're equals. We, extend that work. They start to mentor others. They become examples for others in their community. And that's the kind of thing that makes me really proud. I have that based on all the work I did in Capoeira in San Francisco for many years, who worked with a lot of youth for teenagers, and they had come from some just really difficult situations they had to live through. Now around the country, there's a lot of those kids who own their own martial arts studios. And like that to me it's the best, right? There's nothing better. I feel so proud of the work that I did to help support them in their development, because they became more independent as a result. So I think that's what I would want for my legacy.
Awesome. Well, we'd be happy to be part of the Pamily cult. So hopefully
you are part of the Pamily. So
good. Yeah. So hopefully when you hear this on playback, you're happy with the outcome enough to share it and get us in the family. And,
absolutely. I would love that.
Yeah. And then last, do you have any, advice, if the 20-year-old you to give to my daughter, being a 20-year-old young woman, entrepreneur already, COO at a very young age, any advice to give her, for me?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I'll give it to her this time, because I think really it's a lot of people ask me the question of, like, what do you regret, or what would you do differently? And I made a lot of decisions that were difficult, had difficult consequences. And part of it made me who I am. But I think to really develop a trust and understanding for your own instinct, and to be very open to always learning, having the growth mindset. If you've read the book Mindset by Carol Dweck, it's a great book. It's really looking at, how you can constantly be looking at, being curious about things, being open to change, like being willing to change your point of view, where you can find something that is like a kind of better thought or approach. But my friend Bob Sutton, who's a professor at Stanford, says he has strong opinions held weakly. which I love, which means like, you can trust your instinct, and you can have a lot of people saying, okay, here's what you should do. Like, if you want to be successful, you need to do X, Y, Z. When you're in touch with your own intuition, you can be open to hearing that feedback. You can filter through and take the things that are relevant to you, but also to really trust your judgment, that there are certain things that you might know, even if you don't necessarily see the results right away, that through time do form this really consistent thread of your core values and of your ethics. And that's the thing I think that I feel the most proud of having, in many cases, stuck to my instinct, and to know that over time, I think it's created a respect that I have for myself. It means I don't live with regret. And it also means I've had long-term relationships. So, it's not that you always have to just be walking around saying, no, I'm right, and everything I do is right. You want to be open, you want to learn. But especially men, bless their hearts, will very often, sometimes with less experience that you have or less insight, may have a very strong idea, of what you want. So trust it in business, trust it in life. I have no idea if you have a person in your life right now, but for your person, whoever your person is, don't settle for anybody less than somebody who just really loves you for who you are, and whose main objective is to grow themselves and also to support you in your own growth. That's what I'm happy to say is what my husband and I have. And that's what I want for my kids. And that's really what I want for you too.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate all that. I think that's actually great advice. And
yeah, that was.
Yeah, I'm not one to take advice from people and just shake it off and not implement it. So I'll definitely implement that into everything I do. So
yeah,
I appreciate that.
And I have to let you know, I actually had told her it's a goal of ours, and you might hear this in future podcasts, that when we bring women on the podcast, I actually want her to be the primary interviewer and me just sit back and listen. And one of the things that we're working on together is she's like, Dad, you have to let me do this in my own time. So when she asked you a question today, I was like, yes. Fine.
That's probably the first question I've asked in the 6 pot. Well, the 2 were us, but the other 4 I haven't. I don't know.
So you made her comfortable enough to actually do that, and I thank you for that. And also I should let you know that Julie and I know a lot of people that listen to this podcast are going to be avid readers, and I look at myself as a personality, and I always I love talking and I love listening to people talk. So I need audiobooks. Not that I can't read, I just never take enough time to read something. So all your books, same. I've been actually writing them down, and hopefully they're in audio form, because that's
they are
good, because that's what it takes for me to do it. It's one of the things that I've almost wanted to push or advocate for schools, is to realize that sometimes if somebody doesn't want to read, it doesn't make them a non-intelligent person. They just don't have the capacity to sit still for that amount of time. It's one of the things that I almost want to get across on this podcast. I always say, my best thinking is in my truck, because it sticks me in a place and forces me to stay there,
I'm with you. I resisted for the longest time. I used to love to read growing up, but I'm a big advocate for audiobooks too. So Body of Work, I narrated Body of Work. I didn't narrate Escape from Cubicle Nation, but it's a professional narrator. So maybe you could start with Body of Work, but I would definitely have an audio version of my next book when it comes out. And then when I love Chicago. My best friend's originally from Chicago. So when I do my book tour, if we can all travel by that point next fall, I will make sure to have a Chicago stop, and we can have some kind of fun gathering. I actually have a lot of clients and friends in Chicago. So I love the city.
I'd love to meet you.
We
in
can
person.
all hang out.
This was a great podcast. I will say you're the first podcast a guest that we've had on that I have not known already. I should say this. And it's just amazing to me, the level of conversation we could carry on. This was a fabulous experience, I think, for us. So.
It was a joy for me too. It was so nice to meet you. I'm glad you reached out. So we will stay connected. You're officially part of the Pamily, so don't worry.
Well, thanks for taking the time. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
happy early birthday.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right. See you later.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.